off to school pursuing medicine, and got involved in emergency medicine. And while I was going through paramedic training, I had the opportunity to work at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And at that time, I was out there working, taking care of people who were hurt in the infield, taking them to the hospital. And somebody came to me and said, hey, you ought to consider doing this stuff, in the pits, or, and, you kind of work your way up. You work in the infield and you go work the pits or garage area. And then I was very fortunate that someone from the safety team, Max Kleiss, came up and said, would you be interested in working on a dirt race at the Indiana State Fairgrounds? And that night we went out. It was the Friday night before the Indy 500 weekend, and I had a terrible crash. And fortunately, it was an opportunity for me to show what I was capable of doing out on a racetrack. And after that, I was approached by Dr. Bach at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and he asked me if I wanted to be on the safety team.
Very cool.
And so that was back in 1992.
Awesome. Have you been with the safety team since then?
Yes, I have been.
Okay.
And obviously we were working at the track in some capacity from 82 all the way up to 92, either in the garages and the pits, and then on the safety team started in 93. And then in 96, Indy Racing League was formed. We started traveling, and been traveling ever since doing this. And then worked about every position, from a firefighter rescue position in the back of the trucks to a paramedic, primary paramedic in the front, and then started driving about 8 years ago as a crew leader. And then this last year, actually January of this year, I was named the manager of the track safety team.
Very cool, very cool. Were you a fan of racing before you got involved in motorsports?
Well, I think part of that happens in Indianapolis, just because you grow up around it, and yes, I was a fan. There was a local speedway, a little figure-8 track called the Speedrome on the east side of Indianapolis, and we would sneak over there and watch some races. And then we go out to Indianapolis. It was called Indianapolis Raceway Park, in Claremont, and we'd go out there for the drags, and then we'd go out and watch the 5/8 oval stock car races on Friday nights. But then in high school, it was a rite of passage to skip school and go out and be a railbird and partake of the IMS activities in the infield and whatever. And it was funny because I'd go out there and I found myself standing at the fence and watching the cars, and all the other stuff going on as a teenager. I really did have a real drawing to racing at that point, and paid attention. I saw Sneva break the 200 record. While I was out there, and so as my emergency medical and fire career started developing, in parallel, my interest with racing started at the same time. And so it was kind of cool for me because I was really interested in emergency medicine, really interested in the fire rescue business, loved racing, and so that passion just really drew me into being on a safety team, and very fortunate for this opportunity, with the Holman George family starting the safety team years ago at IMS, and then the opportunity that IndyCar has now to make sure that they support this effort, and we're out there for the drivers. It just allowed me to really expand what I did as a paramedic and as a firefighter, and I've gotten to travel all over the world in the meantime, and do some pretty spectacular things.
Hartman, I've read that on September 11th in 2001, basically that day, you and some other firefighters got in a bus and headed down there.
Well, Indianapolis, sponsored by the Indianapolis Fire Department, is the FEMA Indiana Task Force 1 team, and I was one of the original members of that team that was formed years before 9/11, and that was one of our first major deployments. And so literally within 15 hours after the towers went down, Indiana Task Force 1 was one of the first teams deployed. So we were able to go on that deployment. There was 56 of us that went. I was a safety officer, which kind of seems, I do safety here, and I was safety with that FEMA team, you know, it was the first time I'd ever been to New York, and I have not been back.
Okay.
Now I plan on going with my wife sometime and seeing it under a different light.
Sure.
You know, seeing the memorials. But it was once again a very challenging sight to see and be a participant in it. You know, and you know, the New York firefighters that lost a lot of their brothers, you know, to see what they were going through. I worked on the night shift from 12-hour shifts, and I literally worked for 3 or 4 days thinking this is the biggest thing I've ever been on. And then I went up in a ladder truck with New York Fire up in a bucket so I could actually see over the top of the whole thing.
Oh, wow.
And found out that I'd only been working on about 1/5 of the whole operation.
Oh my gosh.
And it was that you know, it's that big of a situation going on, and just to see the humanity with the people. There were people digging with buckets, pickle buckets, plastic 5-gallon buckets in their hands, you know, that weren't firefighters, they weren't paramedics, they were just there to help, you know, and then there were a lot of people there that were looking for hope, you know, and you know, it was you know, obviously an experience of a lifetime as far as rescue business goes. We were out there, and unfortunately, we weren't able to find anybody alive at that time. So it was one of those experiences that you train for, and you know, only certain people, you know, were sent to go. I know in Indianapolis there were hundreds of firefighters who wanted to go. You know, they all wanted to go out and help. But literally there was thousands of rescue and responders there, and kind of had to say, hey, you can help in another way, you know. And I guess the positive when we got back was the team, a lot of people wanted to be interested in being on the FEMA team and being on Indiana Task Force 1 and be part of something and train, because it's a lot of downtime, and you don't want that big event to happen, but you want to be prepared, you know, and you know, and that's similar to what we do here. You know, we want a race to go green, white, checker, you know, and we don't want obviously to see these drivers that we get close to hurt and injured, but as paramedic, firefighters, and rescue personnel, we want to give them a chance of surviving when that happens, and we want to be at the best of our game when it does.
If I'm being honest, just listening to you talk, it almost gets me choked up hearing how you know, precious life can be, and how important that, you know, people like yourself and other firefighters and paramedics are to taking care of us, essentially.
I'm one person, and you know, and there are 30 other people on this team, some very talented individuals that just push each other every day, and it's the same way when I go back to the Indianapolis Fire Department. There's just a world of talent out there, of people who have that dedication and desire to help. And you know, and I think if there's anything, if you take away from bad things happening, is that people should be comforted knowing that there are people out there that are that dedicated, and I work with those people every day, and I'm blessed to see them every day at work at the fire department and here on this safety team. And I think you know, it is truly a team effort, and it's truly special to be part of that type of a brotherhood and sisterhood.